I didn't realize we were coming up on our 300th episode. I still can't believe we're on 300 episodes. That's crazy because I still feel like I'm trying to figure out this whole podcasting thing, even though we're 300 episodes in. But something really interesting happened where I just lined up a bunch of different episodes and interviews and things like that without even knowing that this was our 300th episode. And had I known that, I would have planned out a very special episode. I would have planned out a very special guest, but the universe made it happen anyways. There have been a handful of people over the years that have really helped me out in a very major way. Everything from business to personal life and everything in between. And one person that I've been wanting to get on the podcast is Fiona, who you guys have heard me talk about and mention on the podcast a few times. And I don't know, there was something inside of me that just said, hey, reach out to her, have her on the podcast. And I did. And it was funny when I sent that message, I hadn't talked to her in a few months, and she sent me a message back and said, you literally just popped in my head the other day, and I was going to check in to see how everything was going. And I was like, yeah, I'm checking in to see like how you were doing, and also wanted to have you on the podcast. And she wanted to do it. So we did this episode. It was a beautiful episode. It was over an hour or close to an hour. It flew by. And it was a very meaningful episode for me because of the impact Fiona has had on my life. And I know the impact that she will have on your life. And so we recorded the episode. And then like the next week, my team came to me and was like, hey, we have our 300th episode. What do you think about making Fiona's episode? And I was like, I could not think of a better person to come on to the podcast and do the 300th episode with me. And so with that being said, this episode was really powerful. It was hopefully going to be very impactful for you. We talk everything from relationships, and I'm not talking about just romantic relationships. I'm talking about relationships with other humans, what that looks like, some of the most impactful wisdom that I've learned from Fiona to bring more internal peace, more clarity, more being tuned with my body, be a better partner, a better boss, a better father, a better listener, just a better human, I can say, came from a lot of wisdom I received from Fiona over the last couple of years. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm really excited for the episode. Hopefully you guys are too. So if you're ready for it, well, keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we have a pretty amazing episode for you, one that I'm really excited about. I know if you've been a listener on the podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about Fiona a few different times. You heard me talk about her book. And Fiona is someone that I have worked with in a couple of different ways over the last couple of years, mainly through my relationship. She helped me through my divorce, giving me some of the most amazing perspectives that helped me navigate it with grace and from a perspective that I'm proud of. And she has become one of my mentors on a couple different levels over the years. And so it's such an honor to have her on the podcast. And I'm excited to dive into this conversation. But Fiona, I am really grateful for you coming on and sharing your wisdom with our audience. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I'm very excited and happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited as well, obviously. I for anyone who may not know who you are or not heard me talk about you on the podcast, can you just give us a little inside peek or info on what is it that you actually do?
Great question. You know, I can give you the standard answer, but I feel like it's morphed into so many different things over the years. But my passion, what I do, mainly my focus is helping people navigate their relationships. And by relationships, I don't just mean intimate ones, although that's a large part of what I do. But, you know, I think that relationships are the foundation of everything in our life. And there's not a moment in any given time of day that we are not in a relationship with something. And so I think being able to do them well is the cornerstone of well-being, because connection, human beings cannot thrive without connection. And so if we don't know how to access it, and we don't know how to create it really well in a way that fulfills us, then we're just not, we're kind of surviving, not thriving. So to me, I'm just passionate about anything to do with the relationship space.
I love that. And I actually have one question for you, because one of the things that was unexpected for me in working with you was actually the relationship with myself that improved. Do you find that when people work with you, the relationship with themselves is also something that gains more clarity, depth, and strength?
So much. Because when your relationship with you changes, your energetic frequency changes. And our energetic frequency is what determines everything. And it's the one thing that we can't fake. I would have so many people contact me and say, Fiona, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why things are so difficult with my husband, wife, kids, co-worker. Yeah, they upset me, they frustrate me, but I don't say it. I don't say anything. I mean, what's the problem? And I'm like, I just smile and say, well, if it's in your thoughts, it's in your frequency.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the word thoughts, and I think that probably is going to be a big topic for us on today's episode, because there was one piece of advice that you gave that I think really allowed me to be more in touch with myself. And that was, I remember the line so clearly, which was, Brandon, you're not in a relationship with that person or this person or any person really. You're in a relationship of your thoughts with that person. And in that, I never realized that before, because anytime I'm in a relationship with someone, whether it's my kids, my parents, intimate relationship or whatever, I think it's very easy to go to victimhood, or this person did this to me, or this is how this person's behaving. But what you don't actually understand is that your perspective of that scenario is literally controlled by your thoughts. And so when you said that to me, it was like, phew. But I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper into that for the audience, or maybe give a better explanation on what does that actually mean, though? You're in a relationship with your thoughts of that person. Because sometimes I say that to people and I just get glazed over eyeballs, and I'm like, how do you not get it? So how would you explain that?
Well, I think, and this is I'm glad that you brought this up, because this is a really big aspect of what I teach, because I'm all about building something from the ground up versus the top down. And so building something from the ground up is about understanding how we create our reality as human beings. And notice I use the term human beings, not men versus women. Because as human beings, we create our reality exactly the same way. There's this wonderful sameness amongst everybody. Yes, there are differences, but at a core level, we create our reality the same way. And so when you understand that, it's very calming. It's very freeing. We feel lighter. We feel like we understand. And I truly believe with enough understanding, conflict will not exist. And so you give people enough understanding, and I'm going to come back to the point that you've made about being in a relationship with your thinking about someone versus the person, is that when you see that, when you understand that, it gives you so much more choice in how you want to show up in a moment of now. Your level of awareness goes through the roof. And with that, your level of emotional intelligence and your capacity. So there's so much more of you on offer. And this is amazing for our relationships. It's amazing for a human being. It's just amazing for connection. And I can say this because I've been teaching this understanding for people for a long time now. And it doesn't matter who I teach it to, whether it be someone in the US, such as yourself, or someone in Asia, or someone in the UK or Europe, the response is the same. People feel this lightness and this sense of relief, because it's like, okay, that makes so much sense to me. And so what I mean by that is, between you and every single experience in your life, there is a bridge. And that bridge is your thinking about that experience. Now, if you don't understand that, if you don't understand how that works, if you can't see that, you will literally look in the wrong place for the answers. And I think when it comes to the relationship space, there's so much misinformation out there. There is so much complicated information. And whilst on the surface things sound good, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. It doesn't shift the needle when the needle needs to be shifted in a moment of now, when there's conflict or you're triggered or you're feeling disconnected or you don't know what to say or you're walking on eggshells. Those moments when we need to access something else, all of that complicated information is not the thing that's going to move the needle. What moves the needle is an understanding of how we work. And so thought is this most misunderstood. And I think it's the misunderstanding has us utilize it in a way where we innocently work against ourselves. And this is extremely problematic when it comes to every aspect of our lives, but in particular in relationships. So what do I mean by that? So, as many spiritual teachers over the years will say, the answers, if you ever want to look for change, the answer lies within. But for most people would say, well, I don't know what that means. I mean, it sounds good, but what am I looking for? Like I look within, okay, but now what? And I've had many people come to me and say, I've heard that saying, Fiona, but now what? What does that, what do I do with that? I feel like there's some truth there, but how does that apply to me? And I think the missing link for that is this understanding. It's like, well, when you hear the term look within, what you're looking for is, where is your level of awareness about this situation? What is the level of thinking that you have about this situation? Are you focused on you? Are you in your personal intellectual thinking, which is very much more rigid, judgmental based, rule based, tends to think that, when we're in our personal minds, and everybody has personal thinking, we tend to think that we're right. We tend to think that our reality is more correct. And so we will double down and defend that. It makes it very hard for us to be open to something new, to be able to step into somebody else's reality, and most importantly, to be able to get over ourselves.
Yeah. Can I give a concrete example of this and see if I'm understanding this correctly? So I think one of the ways when you started to teach this to me, and make me aware of this and how the mind works and thought works, is actually with my kids. And so, like obviously being a single dad now and like running a business on my own, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And so my emotional bandwidth can be really not a lot on some days, especially when I'm stressed or have a big launch or something coming up. But I do remember this one time in the morning at the table, one of my daughters was just not wanting to eat anything at breakfast. And it's extremely frustrating because it's like, I got a big, huge day. I can't be late, drop you guys off. We got these deadlines, these like everyday things that we have to deal with. And I can just feel the emotion coming up. I can feel the trigger. I can feel the anger. I can feel all of this stuff. And all of a sudden, I just got really frustrated because she was not eating something for breakfast that she's been eating for weeks. It felt like. And I remember in the moment, I actually caught myself because my reality, my thought was like, why is she doing this? She's going to make us late. I'm trying to do my best. She's giving me a hard time. And I feel like it's exactly what you just said, which is like, we get into defensiveness. My reality is right. This is my situation. How dare they do this to me? And then all of a sudden in that moment, any sort of connection that I wanted with my daughter, it's killed. It's dead. It's gone. Right. And so I remember like, okay, where are my thoughts going? And then I remember my next thing was like, what are her thoughts? My thinking is like, let's get inside of her perspective. And I just remember asking, how come you don't want this anymore? Like, what had happened? And she had felt sick, and it could have been from the food, not from the food last time she ate that food. So she just didn't want it anymore. So her reality was like, I'm getting really sick, or I'm of this thing. It made me not feel good. I had this experience. I just don't want that anymore. I had this reality of, we need to get to school on time. Just eat your damn food. Let's go. And they were colliding. And then I remember that the whole thing of like, you're not in a relationship with her right now. You're in a relationship with your thoughts. Where are your thoughts out? How do you recorrect this? How do you get inside of hers? And then from that moment, we were able to smooth it over, figure it out with like no yelling, no fighting, no whatever. Is that a good real life example to sort of describe what you're talking about?
It's a fantastic example, and there's a couple of reasons why. The thing is, in order to create any form of change, there is only one way. People think there's multiple ways. There is only one way to create long-term sustainable change in any relationship in anywhere of our lives. And that is via fresh thinking and insight. That's it. If you don't have access to fresh thinking or insight, nothing will change. You may try really hard, like you'll try really hard. Like maybe you'll, for example, with your daughter, you without that fresh thought, and the fresh thought was, hang on, where am I? Where's my thinking right now? You had that moment of awareness, that moment of realization. That was the fresh thought. That was an insight. Hang on, where am I? Okay, I'm really doubling down here, or whatever your version of that was. And that realization had you open up a doorway that you would not have done so with her, because without that realization, what we tend to do is evidence gather. Oh, this is just so typical. I can't cop a break. It doesn't matter what I do. I mean, I've cooked her favorite food. Why does she have to play up today of all days? I've got so much going on. I don't have time for this. And so we build and build and build until we build ourselves up into a point where we snap, say something we don't mean, get defensive, etc. And then, as you so succinctly said, connection's gone. And any capacity for that to move forward in a way that benefits you both has either diminished or greatly lessened.
And I think it's hard because if you're not because thought is happening all the time. And if you're not aware of it, it like basically runs the show. And like what you said is, then once the thought comes in, it's almost like cognitive dissonance, where it's like the thought comes in and then now it's looking for proof. It's like almost like a safety mechanism. It's like, we had this thought, this is our reality, we need to protect it and defend it. We're going to find all the examples in the world until we've convinced ourselves that this is the reality. And then you don't even realize the person in your relationship is doing the exact same thing. And then you're just butting heads all day, every day.
That's it. That's it. And so, if you don't know between you and every interaction, there is your thinking of that interaction. If you don't understand that, to you, you will look at life and go, well, that's the way life is. That's how it is. Now, if you look out there and you think this is the way life is, like my child's being, obstinate, they're getting in the way of me getting out the door, for example, then what choice do you have in that moment other than to control your child or whoever it is? Do it now. Eat your breakfast now. I don't have, the only option that is there for you is to change that thing. Now, as we all know, human beings do not like to be controlled.
No.
We don't want to be kind of dominated. In fact, it goes against universal law to overcome another human being's free will. But this is what we do. And we do it innocently because it looks like, I need you to hurry up, or I need you to be different. In other words, I'm now looking outside of myself. I'm now looking out here for the answer. I'm now no longer looking here. See, in the moment that you had the realization of where's my thinking, instead of looking out there, you looked in here. And this is where the power lies, because all of a sudden you went, oh, hang on, I haven't got great thinking about this right now. Because you understand the way thought works. You know the difference between thinking you can trust and thinking you can't trust, because thought is the greatest con artist on earth. It will con you in ways you can't even imagine. And if you don't know how to navigate that, if you don't know the difference between thinking you can trust and thinking you can't trust, or healthy thinking and unhealthy thinking, and everybody has that, that's the human experience. You can't personal development that away, right? That's just a fundamental aspect of being human, right? You can attend as many personal development courses as you like, but that will never change, because it's as fundamental to our experience as breathing in and breathing out. But if you know how to navigate your thinking well, boy, oh boy, oh boy, do you operate in a completely different way.
I mean, I noticed for me, I've operated with more internal peace, more ease. It was like a weight on my shoulder I didn't even know that I was carrying. And then it's just like gone. But what I realized that it also did for me is it gave me more empathy for people in my life, because you start to, when you understand someone else's experience, what they're going through, what their reality is, you can hold so much more space. And I've been able, especially over this last year, to hold so much more space than I was ever capable of for other people in my life. But my question is, because I know the audience may be thinking this, is when do you know you have fresh thinking versus I'm going to call it distorted thinking. I don't know what other word you want to call it, but how what are the key indicators? How do we look at that? How do we develop the awareness of where our thinking's at?
Well, think of it like this: fresh thinking comes from something other than your personal mind. Right? So think of your personal mind as a Google search engine. Everything that is in Google. So if I ask a question of Google, I will only get an answer based on the fact that that question has already been asked in Google. If it hasn't been asked in Google, I won't get an answer to my question. So your personal mind is full of everything you already know. And so you cannot access fresh thinking via your personal mind. And or another word for personal mind would be your intellect. We are not meant to be in our intellectual mind as much as we are. Now, I'm making up these numbers because I don't know how you measure something like this. So I will preface this. What I'm about to say is made up, not based on any scientific fact whatsoever. But, I feel like we are in our personal mind 95% of the time. And in the rest of our mind, and I'll explain what that means, about 5%. And this is a cause of an enormous amount of suffering in the world. Cause of emotional, as you said, dissonance, a cause of a lot of pain, anger, frustration, people feeling terribly unhappy, and all the other things that come from that. So when you get fresh thinking because it is always loving. It is always loving. And when I say loving, I mean, so for example, you wondering what was going on for your daughter is very loving.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not just focused on you, you're now focused on the collective.
Yeah.
And so fresh thinking will always expand your mind and have you see something in a way that you've never seen it before, or have you think about something that you wouldn't have thought about. You would have, it's like it cuts through the noise and touches something else. It's expansive. It feels good. It feels lighter. And when we start to appreciate fresh thinking, and there's not enough of an appreciation out there for it, like all of a sudden it opens up a whole other world. Like if you know that by being able to see someone else's reality, for example, and I'm just using the reality of your daughter, and you can create a completely different outcome versus doubling down, doing this, we would choose that. I truly believe that about human beings. If we can find a way to choose love, we'll choose it. But it's often very hard to see because our reality is all consuming, and our thinking is all consuming, and then the emotions that come with that thinking are all consuming. And so it's very common for us to get lost in our thinking. Now, we don't stay there because well-being is our natural state. Coming back to a place of neutrality is our natural state. This is how people can get over things, move past things, let go of things. We do have the capacity for that. It's inbuilt. We have what I would call a psychological immune system that does a really good job, but we're not taught this stuff. We're taught that we have to manage ourselves and squash our thinking and get rid of it and override it, which is just such hard work. It's exhausting.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like it's unhealthy, because I feel like that's what people do is like, I have anger and I know I need to control my reaction, so I'm going to shove this down. Whereas I feel like, from my experience, is when I can get back to a place of fresh thinking, someone else's perspective, it's more of a process of letting go. I let go of the anger because I now understand and I have more clarity and more empathy. And it's so much easier to let go from that thought, from that point.
Absolutely, Brandon. It's so much easier. And really, you get to a point where it doesn't make sense. Imagine getting to a point where, and I say this from my own personal experience, I was a very reactionary uptight person, very quick to defend, very quick to self-righteousness, and and I really didn't like that about myself. And I'd done a lot of different programs over the years, and nothing had really shifted that. I could apply a few strategies, a few techniques, but ultimately I would just come back to that point. And I started to believe, oh, that's just the way I am, and I can't change that. And I had a lot of shame around that. And when I started to learn this and I saw this in my own life, and I went, that's not who you are, Fiona. It's just where you go.
Yeah.
I was like, wow,
That's really big.
really cool. And that insight, that realization gave me so much more choice. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm still me. It doesn't mean some of you are going to listen to this and say, oh, great. So what do you do about those people that are hurting us, Fiona? People who are being difficult. I'm not suggesting that you just become a doormat and you ignore it. But what I am saying is, when you know the difference between wisdom, and that's another word for fresh thinking, okay? When you know the difference between wisdom and intellect, and you know where one is coming from the other, and you start listening to your own wisdom, and our relationship with wisdom is is something that as a human race we have become more and more disconnected from, and we need to become more and more connected to. Because you don't, when you're connected to your own wisdom, you don't need to think anywhere near as much as you do. You just don't. You trust that the answers will come. You work with that rather than against it, pushing against it, which so many people do. And people who are really well connected to wisdom do relationships incredibly well on all levels.
I want to dive into the wisdom, because there was also something you told me with the wisdom and clarity, but I do want to come back because there's something that I think is really important to address, and I don't want that to get lost, which is I think that when you start to, at least this has been my experiences, when I start to implement this more with people in my life, you can't be a doormat for people. And I want people to understand is there's a difference between what a boundary is and what an emotion is. And I think sometimes people get those confused, where they're like, well, I'm so empathetic and I'm going to hold the space and I can just let people treat me the way. It's like, no, you can still maintain a boundary or a level of respect of how you want to be treated. But the difference is there's not that emotion of anger there. And at least that's been my experience. And I think people sometimes get those sort of confused of like, well, I'm going to be this like peaceful human being and da 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 da. And it's like, no, you can't let people treat you in a way that's unhealthy. So you have to maintain a boundary, but you can do that in a respectful, peaceful way. It doesn't have to happen in that way. So that's the difference for me. Does that make sense, or is there something?
Yeah, no, you've explained that beautifully, and I've seen that. I saw that evolution in you, Brandon. When we were working together, your ability to me, I call that speaking my truth. If I'm speaking my truth, I don't need to worry about boundaries, right? I'm just speaking my truth. Now, people struggle to do that because they go into what I call someone else's emotional lane, and they start carrying someone else's emotion. So, for example, oh, but I can't say that I don't want to hang out with them today because, I haven't seen them for ages, and, they said that they really miss me and I don't want to hurt their feelings. Right? So now I'm carrying someone else's emotional load, sorry. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So now you're no longer speaking your truth. And now you find yourself saying yes to something you really didn't want to. Then you're conflicted by it. Whereas when I'm speaking my truth, I'm not in someone else's emotional lane. I have this clarity, and someone says, hey, do you want to hang out? And I'd say, hey, I'd love to, but I need some time out this weekend. Can we make another time? And then there's a full stop at the end of that sentence. I don't think about it anymore because that's wisdom speaking for me. Fiona, you need a break.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That sounds like what wisdom is. And how do you know the difference of your truth and wisdom? And it was almost like they seem like one and the same. So my next question is like, well, then how do you know the difference between wisdom and sort of like a fear or something that just isn't wisdom that may feel like it. So I'm trying to think of a good example, but um, like if I'm emotionally dysregulated and I'm just like, my kids are like, hey dad, can I like lay with you on the couch or something, snuggle with you on the couch? And I'm like, I just need space or I need whatever, but I'm in this high emotion where I would normally, my truth is normally like, I just want to connect with my kids. I don't know if that's the best example in the world, but like, how do we know the difference between something that is our truth and something that is wisdom versus just an emotional experience we're having in the moment? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a great question. This is where understanding the role of feelings and emotions in our lives is super important because we've got that back to front. Most people think that their emotions or their feelings about something are an indicator of how true something is.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
That's not how feelings and emotions work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That your feelings and emotions are your navigational system for where your state of mind is only. And so learning that, and it's a very big part of what I teach, is enormously freeing for people. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. So, for example, if I'm fearful of something, I know I don't have clarity. And what I'm looking for is clarity. So, if I'm fearful or worried about something, now, obviously, if you are the exception to this is if your life is in danger. Okay, so that is the exception to what I'm saying. If your life is in danger, then run or do
Yeah. So
whatever
like if a
you need
bear's
to
chasing
do.
you, don't be like, well, it's
Yeah,
my truth that the bear's not going to get me. Like you should probably
that's
run.
yeah. Like, okay, so but if you're fearful of something, to me, I'm very aware of when I've got what I would call loaded thinking. And loaded thinking can be through worry, anger, fear, upset, sadness, guilt, regret, etc. And loaded thinking can also be when I'm really excited and I've got a really strong sense of urgency. Loaded thinking, I'm like, well, I don't have clarity right now. And so for me, clarity is more important. So I wait for my mind to clear and then I go, okay, is this really important to me? Do we need to talk about this? So, as an example, let's just say my husband and I have a different point of view on how we're parenting our kids. Now, I might find myself feeling angry and frustrated, and if I'm again, we're coming back this way. I'm looking within. Okay, I'm angry and frustrated. That tells me that my thinking is distorted. I can't trust it. I have to wait for my mind to clear. Now, I've learned to trust that more than my anger, fear, worry, upset, frustration. I've learned to trust in clarity. Clarity is my greatest asset. So I will look for clarity and I will wait for clarity. When I look at something with a clear mind, it might be, yes, we still need to talk about this, but now I have the capacity to talk about it through a calm, neutral, curious frame of mind. I'm not so triggered. I'm not making it personal. I'm not kind of trying to control my husband's narrative. I'm not trying to prove a point. I'm now sitting in a neutral space where I can speak my truth. And I can also hear what my husband has to say. So that and this is very important for you couples out there, because when I'm in that state of mind, it no longer becomes scary that my husband and I have a different point of view, because I know that we can work through differences really well. So that's not something I'm frightened of. We have a history of dealing with conflict really well. And so it doesn't matter if we have a different point of view. I don't care, because I know we can talk about it and we can work through it. Now, sometimes, right, the opposite can be true. I can be really uptight about something and whatever, and then my mind clears and I'll be like, Fiona, you are way off base. We don't even need to talk about that. I actually don't even care. And so I've been saying to my students, we were having a big chat about this in my relatable program last night, actually. We were talking about this, that if something is bothering you when you have low thinking, then it doesn't, that's the only time it bothers you is when your thinking is low, then it doesn't really bother you.
That's pretty good. I like that. So if I'm understanding correctly, when we are in high emotions, that's when we know wisdom and clarity probably aren't there. And we have to wait, which, by the way, is really hard for someone like me, where I have more of like, if we're looking at attachment styles, which I don't know if you do or don't, but for me, I'm like a very anxious attachment. Like I just want, or I'm also an entrepreneur, which means we're problem solvers. So it just, when there's a problem, I want to fix it. And it doesn't matter what emotional state I'm in. I just need that problem fixed. And so the hardest part when working with you was actually recognizing that pattern in myself and then getting very good at just, I remember like, you're like, Brandon, can you just get comfortable being uncomfortable? And I'm like shaking my head no, but saying yes. I'm like, I think so. And that's what I had to do. And that allowed some really great, it created space for clarity to eventually come in on some big things that I needed clarity to come in on, which honestly brings me to my next point. As I remember you thinking, you're telling me like, I to this day have never found someone whose clarity never came in. So clarity will come in when clarity needs to come in, because that's when clarity needs to come in. And now we'll tap into that here in a second too, but I want to bring it back really quickly to the wisdom and clarity versus fear. And what I have learned from the universe is that your intuition or wisdom or clarity or internal voice never communicates out of fear. And we know that if you are making decisions out of fear or high emotions, it's usually that's not wisdom. And when people are responding to things with emotion, that's usually not wisdom or clarity either. And I think a lot of people will justify their perspective or their decisions because they're in high emotional states. And that's not truth. That's a high emotional state. That's a lack of clarity. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, well, look, so for example, yes, it's true and not at the same time. So I know there are people out there who have the opposite problem to what I did, which is they struggle to find their voice. So they don't actually say what's on their mind. They keep quiet, they push it down, they don't. So what they need is to speak their truth more, and to say what's on their mind. Whereas for me, I had to learn how to, what I would call, zip it. Now, so for some of you, getting that out is super, super important. And so I'm not advocating that being upset or angry is not okay, or that it doesn't mean it. It's just that I don't know when I'm looking at something through an angry lens how true that is. I can come back to a calmer state of mind and that can still be true,
Yeah, that makes
right?
sense. Yep.
But now, and it can still be my truth, so the truth might be the same, but my energetic frequency around it is different. My capacity to speak, right? So if you're someone who struggles to find your voice and you get angry, but you don't show it, and you're frustrated, and then you wait for a calmer, clearer mind, and you understand how this works, you will find it easier to say what's on your mind. You'll be able to speak your truth, right? So it applies in the same way, if that makes sense. Regardless of what your struggle is, you'll be able to speak your truth. Whereas someone like me was learning, I need to wait until my mind is clear and see if this is true. And I would then be able to express that, but without the anger and the tone and the judgment and the I'm right, you're wrong, and all the other stuff which destroys connection and goodwill and all the good stuff.
So let's go here. If someone, let's say I'm in a relationship with someone and we both are in high emotions, we both calm down, and we do discover that the perspectives we held, or not even perspective, I'm just going to call it our truth, like the thing that is like within us, we're in calm states. We're both at a place of like, yeah, I still think that this is the way forward, or this is what I want, this is my boundary, but they're still conflicting. Do we stay rigid in our truth or what we may have gotten as clarity and wisdom? Or what happens when you're in a relationship with someone and you're both calm, you're both like, no, I really do think that this is like what I need to have, and blah 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 blah, and they're like, okay, this is what I think I need to have, and you're both calm. Like, how do you overcome that?
Great question. You do that through love and curiosity. See, if I'm in a state where I'm defending my position, I mean, if you're in a relationship with someone, you have to learn how to communicate through those problems and listen to someone's point of view. You can't just sit down and go, I'm not. A lot of people think that listening is about whether you agree or not. Well, I don't agree with you, so I'm not listening to you. It's like, well, that's got nothing to do with it. You know, if I've got clarity and calm and I'm coming from that state of mind, I'm like, well, I'm interested into what my husband has to say. Whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be present and I'm going to listen. Now, the quickest way to create connection with a human being is to listen. Right? You will create connection with that person, and then it's not about whether we agree or disagree. It's about mutual understanding. So for example, and previously,
That's a key word right there. I want to highlight mutual understanding.
yeah,
I think is
you have
very
a
important.
mutual understanding where I can look at you. I might look at you and say, I can see this is really important to you. I get it. I get how important this is to you. And sometimes my husband and I have had conversations where we've said, where we disagree, and I can say, I can see this really matters to you. And you'd be like, yeah, it's really important to me. And the fact that I hear it and understand it, and I'm not trying to justify myself, does wonders for the level of generosity with which we approach one another. And so sometimes I might say to him, well, out of a 10, what are you on this? And he'll say, I'm a 10. And I'll be like, you know what? I'm an 8. It's more important to you. Let's do it your way.
So it sounds like you prioritize love and connection over getting your way, essentially.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Think about it like this. The two pillars of partnership are doing what's best for the greater good and being interested in your partner's concern. When you are in a state of mind where all you can see is your perspective, your capacity to do that is virtually zero. And people wonder why the other person stops sharing, stops wanting to hang out with them, because as human beings, we are drawn to what feels good. If it doesn't feel good for me to hang out with my husband, then I'm going to do other stuff. I'm going to hang out with the kids. I'm going to work more hours. I'm going to be on my phone. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to do everything, but like it's got to feel good. I prioritize that feeling, the feeling of goodwill with my husband and I, over everything. Not to the point where I sacrifice myself. So don't, some of you listen to this and go to the extreme, right? But to the point where we are in such a good feeling with each other. And when you're in a good feeling, I'm telling you, you don't care about your differences. You don't even think about them.
Yeah.
They're not even on my mind.
I think the self, at least from my experience, and just please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when it gets to a point when you're in a relationship and you're the one who's self-sacrificing, it's because it's been one-sided too much. Is like maybe you are talking and we're not talking, but things are always like one-sided too much. And so the person who, at least this is what I used to do, is like I would self-sacrifice to keep the peace in the house. And so like even if we did talk peacefully, I would just so much easier for me just to be like boom, yes, boom, yes, boom, yes. And it felt very like sort of one-sided to sort of keep the peace. Is that a dynamic that you see a lot with people, or something for people to be careful of?
I would say to you, if you are in that dynamic, you are not listening to your own wisdom. Wisdom would not have you in that dynamic.
Interesting.
If you're in that dynamic, you are not speaking your truth, and you're probably coming from a lot of fear. To me, what I see is, to me, that's an example of someone over functioning. And when someone over functions, the other person will under function. Now, if you're over functioning, your mind is racing, you don't have clarity, you're coming from fear and lack. That is what I would say, and you're not listening to wisdom, because wisdom, and this is the thing about wisdom, and coming back to your earlier question about how do you know the difference. Wisdom has nothing to prove. So wisdom will not try and convince you of anything. It'll just be this gentle tap on the shoulder. Brandon, is that a good idea? Are you sure about that? Maybe you should just wait a second. I don't know. Do you feel it? It's like waves of, and it can be just tapping you gently, because again, you have to understand wisdom. It's like understanding that universal law that we don't have the right to override someone else's free will. It's not going to sit there and override your right to free will. You choose what you want to choose, but it's just going to gently nudge and go, I don't know about this. Maybe you just want to slow down a little bit. And every time I've ever spoken to someone who's come out of a challenging relationship, without fail, they've said, "Yeah, I knew wisdom was definitely tapping me on the shoulder before I did that. I had a feeling, I had a knowing," and because it's so subtle, and we're not, we've kind of lost the art, or it's kind of been shut down in us to not listen. We're not as tuned in, I guess, right? To me, I call it being asleep at the wheel. We're not as tuned in. And so what we hear is our loud screaming ego, or our personal mind that is trying to convince us, yes, you are right, that is outrageous, I wouldn't accept that from them. And so it's louder, and so we get caught up in it more because it's very loud. It's like, you need to do XYZ, whereas wisdom is not trying to do that. So it's way more subtle, but then love is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Is that a good time to, when that is going on, to have that phrase of get over yourself come up, is when you're stuck in that, which I know we talked last week as well, and you had mentioned the phrase get over yourself. And I remember what you said was like, relationships are really easy if people just learn how to get over themselves. And I needed you to clarify that for me. So can you do that again, but that way the listeners can hear? Because when you said it last week, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, sure. So I do believe that we've overcomplicated relationships. Human beings are actually quite simple creatures, and relationships can be, I'm not saying they should be, but they can be very easy. The thing that makes a relationship difficult is because people don't know how to get over themselves. So an example of that is, I have a different point of view to my husband, right? And I double down on my perspective because I think I'm right. So in that moment, I then become controlling. I become self righteous. I'm justifying myself. I'm coming up with all the reasons why I'm right. And in that space, someone will win, I guess, if you want to call it winning, and another person will lose. Now, now the relationship becomes really hard. And then we draw in all of the reasons why. Well, that's because we're too different. They've got that attachment style. I've got this. This is the reason why we're struggling. No, it's because you've got thinking you can't trust that you're now leading with. Or it's, well, that's because, they don't have the same values as me. That's a bunch of BS. I'm sorry. I don't buy into that at all. It's like, when I focus on goodwill, love, and connection, I am not thinking about whether my husband shares the same values as me, right? We are in sync. I come with a generosity of heart, mind, and soul, and he responds in kind. And it doesn't mean it's perfect. We still have our arguments and our moments, but we get over ourselves really quickly. I know when I am becoming belligerent, and I find it funny. To me, it's hilarious. So I can laugh at myself. I'm playful, and I say, "Sorry, babe, I was being really self-righteous then. Let me just replay that for a second." Right? And it's so comforting for another person when they see that you can see yourself.
Yeah. I think sometimes we get caught. Well, let me put it this way. I think it's very easy to be in a relationship if your connection is built off of, similar beliefs and values and whatever, likes, dislikes. Super easy. And I do think that's where a lot of human connection actually happens, is like when those things are shared. But I do also know that, like, if you're going to be in a long-term relationship, there's no way in hell that your values, every value and every belief and every perspective and like and dislike is going to be the same ever. Like it's going to shift and change. And I think a lot of people will end up splitting when those things start to shift and change. And so it's been very interesting because As you know, I'm in a new relationship now with someone, and we have pretty different political views. Like, we definitely voted for different presidents. We have we have different viewpoints on guns. We have different, like, we're just on opposite ends of the spectrum. But that hasn't actually changed or killed or diminished any of the connection and love that we have for each other. And in fact, I would almost say it's enhanced it, because there's like great discussions and point of views, and it's like fun, and we will try to like discredit the other one, but in like playful, joking ways. And then when it's all said and done, we just move on as if we were talking about like how our day was, and we don't take it personally, and we don't take it as a threat. And and I feel like I've gotten myself to a place, and again, we're never gonna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're ever gonna get to a place where we fully get over ourselves. But I have been able to do that more now than I have in the past, and it's led me to being in a relationship where there's little to no conflict, or if there is any, it's like very calm conversations and finding a way forward together, where there isn't like you won, I lost. It's we won, is sort of the way we take it.
That's it. That's beautiful. See, you can have those conversations because there's enough understanding and trust there that just because we have a difference of opinion doesn't mean that we someone is going to fly off the handle. You know, so many people justify a difference as a reason for them to get angry and nasty and all of those things and kind of project that out. And so we get lost in that. Like, nobody wants to be in a relationship with themselves, let me tell you.
No, yeah,
Like,
no,
my husband is different to me and I respect and honor that. And in many ways, I've said, because I've been able to get over myself, and believe me, for many years I couldn't, but I've said my husband has been my greatest teacher. Because he is different to me and he gives me different perspectives, but I have to have the humility and grace to listen, put my stuff down, and try on something else. People struggle with this.
well, I think it even goes back to like, if you're able to do that, there's so much more expansion in your life, which is what you talked about with fresh thinking. Is it's very expansive. And like, even in my marriage, like, I remember like Jacqueline and I were different in a lot of ways. One of those ways being like the arts. Like, she's way into arts, and when I was younger, when it came to that sort of stuff, I was very much like not getting over myself. Be like, oh, that stuff's stupid and it's boring and it's like whatever. But then when I finally like grew up and embraced it, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of beauty in this that I would have never been able to experience. And Jacqueline was the bridge for me to be able to experience that. Where like, now when I like, one of my favorite things is jazz music and like listening to live music. And I'm like, I never would have been able to experience that joy in my life had I just been rigid, not getting over myself, and just curious into exploring what is it about this thing. And I just think it's such a beautiful way to live. It's just so much more fun and light and just beautiful, because it's just like, I mean, who wants to fight all the time? You know what I mean? Like, who wants to butt heads and fight and argue and like be right? And it's like, cool, that now you're right, but then you just like threw a dagger into your relationship. So congratulations. You just created another mess for yourself.
That's exactly right. Yeah. No, that's a beautiful example, Brandon. And I am so grateful. I honestly, I'm so grateful that I have been given the opportunity to live like this, because the feeling I get to live in is it's deeper, richer, more powerful than anything I can explain. Most people don't understand what's on offer, what's available in terms of the depth of feeling they get to live in. And I firmly believe the quality of the feeling you live in determines the quality of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does. So when, well, yeah, I want to be careful how I ask this, but like, so is there ever a time when it is a right time to leave a relationship? You know what I mean? Like, because I don't want this to come off as like, if everyone operates this way, every relationship will always work. I mean, sometimes there are times where it's just, it needs to move in different directions. And how does someone make that decision? Like, how do we get to a point? Is it just as simple as listening to our wisdom and clarity? Or, I don't know, maybe this is too complicated of a question to
No, it's
ask. I'm not
not.
sure.
It's actually a really simple question.
Okay.
See, most of us think, again, because we misunderstand the role of emotions and feelings and what they're telling us. And so I'm going to use myself as an example. So my husband and I, we've been married. It will be 21 years next month. We were about 6.5 years married, maybe somewhere around there, when I came across this understanding. And we were on the brink of divorce. In fact, I had asked my husband for a separation. I was convinced that we were too different. We didn't have the right values. Like, I was buying into all of the stuff because I'd done a lot of personal development programs. And quite frankly, I do think a lot of too much personal development can be very toxic for relationships. But that's a whole other, maybe that's a whole other
That's a
podcast.
whole nother podcast episode.
But I was really caught up in that narrative, and I had a lot of dissatisfied thinking, and that was really the lens with which I was viewing my relationship and my husband through. I was pretty angry, and I was really, really kind of, I got to a point where I went, yeah, I'm just so, it was so painful and hard. The best thing for us to do is separate. And then as I started to learn this, I started to understand the role of thought, which no one had ever taught me. And I thought I had studied everything there was to study about human beings. And it was blowing my mind. And one of the things that stuck with me was, okay, Fiona, it looks like leaving is a really good idea, but you tend to be in an upset feeling every time it looks like that. Why don't you wait for your mind to clear? Because when my mind is clear, I can hear wisdom. I've got better access to fresh thinking. I'm in a higher level of emotional intelligence. Let's just see what makes sense then. And I would come back to clarity. And every time I would come back, or 99% of the time that I would come back, it never looked like a good idea. And I was like, wow, that's wild. Wow. I get upset and then I'm like, that's it. But when my mind clears, when I come back home, what I would call home to myself, and I get clarity, it doesn't look like a good idea. And so I just kept going with that. Okay. I didn't quite believe in it enough. I didn't trust enough, but I was trusting in what I was learning because I could feel this incredible shift. So I went, okay, well, clarity is saying no. My upset thinking is saying yes. Okay. Well, I'm learning not to trust my upset thinking. So this is new for me. It's like learning to walk on my hands, and I've been walking on my feet all my life, but I'm going to go with it. And so I would say that to anybody. If you are in a relationship where you don't know whether you should stay or go, wait until your mind clears. And if your mind clears and it says you need to go, then perhaps you need to go. Right? You make the decision when you're in a good feeling, which is the opposite to what you'll be taught, right? But that's when you know you can trust your thinking the most. That's when you're most in touch with your truth. That's when you're most in touch with that aspect of yourself that knows that perhaps things that your human doesn't know yet. And so if you trust in that and build on that, you will get the clarity. Now, the thing about clarity is very empowering. It's very empowering. It gives you conviction. And even though it might feel scary to leave because for whatever reason, it gives you a knowing that I've just got to take the next step. I've got to take the next step. I've got to take the next step. And you'll find yourself moving forward in a place that, again, to me is honoring whatever your truth is. So I do find for some people, maybe they're in a relationship that's dysfunctional and toxic, and they haven't been leading from their truth. Their mind clears and they get clarity that actually I need to go. I need to leave. But they do so without all the anger and the upset and the hatred and all of that stuff, which, especially if you're dealing with kids and whatever, can be really, really damaging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes too, it's like that clarity can take a while to come in because the emotions can be strong. They can be intense and they can be big. And I don't know, from my experience too, it's not even like the clarity doesn't come in when the feelings are good. It's almost like when the feelings are neutral. It's like when the negative fear is gone.
That's right.
You know?
That's what I mean by a good feeling. So thank you for
Okay.
pointing that out. To me, a good feeling is when I'm neutral.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
And again, when I say neutral, I don't mean disconnected. I'm very connected. I'm very present.
It's almost like present's a beautiful way to say it. I was gonna say almost like a state of peace, but it's not even peace. It's just a state of, I'm just here in the moment and there's like no emotion, but I deeply understand what I need to do or what is the best move for me to make.
You do. You have this deep knowing. And so the knowing is what you come back to, even though there are times where you're human, as I like to call it, gets frightened and goes, oh, I don't know about this. Because let's face it, our human wants to stay comfortable and doesn't really like change and doesn't want things like it wants continuity, right? But everybody has this aspect of themselves which wants to grow and expand.
Well, and it's really exciting to me too, because my experience of it is when those moments happen, that's when beauty starts to take place. And so like, I even experienced that in business this year, where it took a lot of time for clarity to come in. It's like, all right, clarity, like I have bills to pay and I have payroll and I have like things that need to be paid for. So like, when is it coming in? And sometimes it takes a while, but when it comes in, it like the results that you see in your life can change drastically. You can find yourself in areas that are better, like in business, where I think I told you last week, we started a new brand that was sort of like a side project to show how great our AI was, but it was like something I've been thinking about for a while. And then all of a sudden, our first 30 days, we have almost 10,000 followers on this brand new account. And I'm like talking about things that I'm like really passionate about. I'm like, I would have never gotten here had like things not fallen apart, had I not waited for the clarity to come in. Cause I remember it so clearly. It was like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And clarity came in. It was like, if you're trying to sell your AI, why don't you show how good it is and put your money where your mouth is? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then like a week later, we started it. And here we are 30 days later and we have 10,000 followers on this account. And I'm like, maybe we should turn this into a business because it's just taking, and I'm like, oh my God. So you can just land in these places that you would have never gotten to or planned on. And so it's like, it can be frustrating to wait for the clarity. You're just like, come on, let's go. But when it hits, it brings you to places that I just feel like bring so much more depth and beauty to your life, which is pretty amazing.
100%. That's amazing. Brandon, congratulations. That's a really great example. And to me, is a really great example of your relationship to life. So, when I started at the start of this podcast, I said we're always in a relationship with something at any given moment. There's your relationship with you, your relationship with life, and your relationship with others. And they all affect us. And so to me, that relationship with life, if you're someone who trusts in clarity, trusts in fresh thinking and the power of insight, you're someone who has a very good relationship with life. It's like you are in a co-creation at all times with the divine. You just are, whether you're aware of it or not. And so that co-creation is, I know that clarity will come. And what I need to do is be patient and trust. And my human may get really frightened and scared and going, no, I need to know now, I need to know now, I need to know now. But that's just insecure thinking. That's not truth talking. And so, and this is applicable to everybody. There's no exception to this. We're all the same, us human beings. We're all wired the same way. We're all in the same co-creation. Just the more you understand it, the more you work with it rather than innocently working against it, which is what we do.
And one time, or something that I've also realized too, is that sometimes the wisdom or clarity will like build upon itself. And so what I mean by that is like, let's just say the universe wants me to get to step 10 and I'm sitting here at step 0 and I'm like, okay, well, clarity this. And I'm trying. And I also do believe that sometimes taking action on things like can help bring the clarity as well. But like what I recognized is that the clarity would come in. I'm like so fired up on it. And then I realize, okay, it's step 1. Now I'm standing on step 1, but because I'm standing on step 1, clarity can come in again. And it allows me to see step 2, but I can't see step 2 when I'm on 0. And so what I realized is it like builds upon itself. It's like hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. And then all of a sudden, you're just like on 10 and you're like, what, how did I even end up here? And that's a beautiful thing.
That is, I love that. Yeah, because all you need to do in anything is the next step. And then you will get the next step once you've taken that step.
Right.
That's just how it works. Yeah. We want to know all the steps in advance and then we get ourselves stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You get stuck.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
for
like
sure.
when you trust in that, or like this is the next step. That's all I need to know, and whatever comes after that will come. That's how you start to live a life that's based on the now rather than trying to avoid the past or create the future. You actually start to you're living right now,
Yeah.
which
And
is
I
a very
think
loving place to live.
it is. And I think we could probably even do a whole nother episode on that. But I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I feel like we've kind of gone full circle, and honestly, this hour flew by. Like I looked up and I didn't even realize it was an hour. So
I didn't know until you said that. I didn't
yeah,
either.
I was like, we're maybe 20 minutes into this thing. And so this has been really great. I would love to have you back on at some point. And because I feel like this conversation would be very helpful to a lot of people. But what I would also like is if someone wanted to learn more about you, they wanted to work with you, they wanted to get your book, all that stuff, like please tell people how they can get all of it.
Oh, thank you, Brandon. Yes, well, if you want to know more about what I do, my relatable program is my signature program, which people all over the world are doing, where I teach this understanding. You can go to my website, fionalukies.com.au, and find out more about my program there. My book, Funny Little Human, Transform the Way You See Yourself and the Ones You Love, is available on Amazon. And that in any country, just type that in and you'll find it there. So
amazing. And you are located in Australia, but you work with people around the world.
yeah, I work with people all around the world. Yep.
Love it.
That's the great thing about the internet.
Yeah, I love it. Guys, I cannot recommend Fiona enough. Like I said, I mean, I can count on my hand mentors that have had a deep impact on my life, and Fiona is definitely one of them. So if anything on this podcast sounded interesting to you, would be helpful for you, maybe you want to bring your relationship with yourself or your significant other to a different level, I cannot recommend Fiona enough. So go check her out. And Fiona, again, thank you so much for spending an hour with us. I'm very grateful. So thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, guys, if you love this episode, let me know. Head over to iTunes, leave us a review. I love reading those reviews. Thanks for tuning in this episode, and we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone. Hey, guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested. And thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.